Hi, everybody. Welcome back for another Philly Codefest workshop. We want to welcome oSTEM, Charlie Stewart and Con McCormick here today, talking about building authentic diversity, hosted by oSTEM. Today's workshop, we'll talk about what diversity means, how it affects everybody. They'll talk about simple yet effective tips to be an advocate in any environment. So again, this is part of the Philly Codefest workshop series. Philly Codefest is scheduled for April 4th to April 9th. April 4th to April 8th will be online hybrid. There'll be some space made available here at CCI, and on the 9th will be in person down on the second floor at 3675 Market, the Quorum. We have a lot of really exciting things that we'll be announcing starting today and tomorrow. Headlined by Comcast. Comcast, they'll be our title sponsor this year. So we're thrilled to have Comcast come back this year. They were a title sponsor a couple of years ago. With that, there'll be a lot of activities around Comcast, including on April 7th, Thursday, April 7th, will be Comcast Day here at CCI. So there'll be Comcast people here all day. There'll be interview sessions, there'll be workshops. I'll have more information about that coming out in the next week or so. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Charlie. Charlie, take it away.
So hi, my name is Charlie. Thank you, Dave, for having me and letting me present. And I'm going to be talking, like he said, about just building out authentic diversity and what that means and like what we really can do that actually has impact. So let me see, I have my slides here. So who am I? My name is Charlie Stewart. My pronouns are he and they. I'm a 5th-year computer science major, which basically just means I'm a senior, but I'm used to talking to people who don't go to Drexel. I've been a teaching assistant for all 5 of those years in the computer science department. In 2017, 2018, I founded oSTEM, which I'll talk about soon, and now I'm the student advisor for the club. And I'm also a council member for the CCI Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, where I work with all different people in the department. We work with faculty, staff, admin to try and make CCI a better place. And then I also have a dog, Winona, who uses she, her pronouns. She prefers good girl, and she may make an appearance later. We'll see. She is a Kong, so she's very busy. And then what is oSTEM? So oSTEM, and I just copied this paste of this description from their website, but Out in STEM is a national, professional, and supportive organization dedicated to forming a safe community for the LGBTQ plus forming a safe community for LGBTQ plus individuals within the STEM field. So I started the Drexel chapter back in 2018. And I started it because in my freshman year, with my first TA I ever had, he learned my dead name, would dead name me and laugh when I got uncomfortable. And then the next term, all the TAs had to go to this is why you have to be diverse sensitivity training, and LGBTQ plus issues weren't brought up at all. And it was really disappointing because that was why we were there. And I realized that we really didn't have anything like this at Drexel for LGBTQ inclusion in STEM. So we put together oSTEM. We had a whole maybe a year, not even, of being able to do things and functioning as an org, kind of working with Castle before we briefly dissolved during the pandemic due to a lot of the executive board's members had to focus on themselves and weren't able to devote time to the org. And now there's a new executive board that I'm kind of the advisor for. As a student, we're working on rebuilding. We currently have 2022-23, which is next school year, officer applications open, which you can find on our link tree or posted on our Instagram or in our Discord. And then we're also on Dragon Link as oSTEM at Drexel University. In the spring terms, we're looking at meetings kind of every other week. It's a little, there are some weeks that are missing, some weeks aren't. But for the most part, they're all going to be Tuesdays, 6 to 7 p.m. And our first spring general body meeting is going to be in week 2 on April 5th from 6 to 7 on Zoom. And it's going to be mostly about elections and things like that. So that is oSTEM. and I'm working with them, and it's kind of like our talk that we're having here today. So to start, what is authentic diversity? And this is a concept that I have found is easier to explain when we first go over what isn't authentic diversity and looking at actual examples of what like bad diversity looks like, and then seeing what authentic and helpful diversity looks like. So first starting, we're going to see in June, it's going to be Pride Month soon, and almost every single company on the face of the planet is going to have a rainbow logo. And this is not inherently bad diversity. Like, it is something, and it is making a statement, but there needs to be action behind the rainbow logo. There needs to be something a little bit more that says what are we actually doing to support the LGBTQ plus community? So like AT&T having a rainbow logo doesn't actually help the struggles that LGBTQ plus people face. And I just chose a few others that, like, once again, GitHub, what are you doing there? PayPal, what are you doing for the LGBTQ plus community? And I just picked the first three that came up on Google. I didn't research much what they were actually doing, but still, I'll cover later, like working within your like sphere of influence to actually make a beneficial change. And then on another side of inauthentic diversity would be something where there's actually harmful actions behind the false rainbow logo. And I'm taking this from the Harry Potter perspective because Harry Potter is something that almost everyone knows what it is. If not, we've read the books or we've gone to Harry Potter land. It's something that is around and very popular. And J.K. Rowling is not a great person and is a very easy example. But in about 2007, at an event in New York City, someone was a kid or somebody asked about Dumbledore, and she said, "I always saw Dumbledore as gay," and there was this thunderous applause and cheering that she was he was coming out as gay. But there's absolutely nothing to support that in the books as writing as to show, oh yes, he is gay, and it's not just she's like there was context but there was no context. And then for things with actual context in the books, she writes in a Hogwarts short story that Lupin being a werewolf was a metaphor for HIV and AIDS and the misconceptions that hurt the LGBTQ plus community based on the AIDS epidemic, but which appears to be very helpful, is that we're taking a character we really like, and we're showing how these negative things in real life impacted him negatively. But if you look at the only other werewolf that is in the book, which is Fenrir Greyback, he is described as, wait, I have it written down. Fenrir Greyback is described in the Half-Blood Prince as the most savage werewolf alive, whose life goal it is to bite and contaminate as many people as possible, specializing in children. So the werewolfism, I cannot pronounce lycanthropy for my life, being a metaphor for HIV and AIDS is heartwarming when we look at Lupin, but then we look at the other side of it and we see this bounty hunter that is actively trying to infect children with with AIDS or werewolfism, the metaphor isn't as heartwarming anymore. And then further on that, J.K. Rowling also writes crime novels under the pseudonym Robert Galbraith, who is a highly controversial psychiatrist who claimed to cure men using electroshock therapy, basically inventing conversion therapy, which is highly, highly horrible. And then she also proudly considers herself a TERF, which is a trans exclusionary radical feminist, and basically is proud to say, I support women, but I don't like trans people. And in the books and writing, it's Rita Skeeter in The Goblet of Fire is described as where is it? It is her. She is described as having curls which contrasts against her strong jaw and having large masculine hands. And she is very frequently predatory towards the kids, is constantly twisting facts, and she is this transphobic caricature of a transgender woman. And these are very common turf rhetoric and transphobic stereotypes for trans women. And so you're not a bad person if you like Harry Potter and enjoy the stories, but part of this is part of like building authentic diversity is recognizing that this that people's bigotry permeates everything, and that we are live in a country that was built on Native American genocide and enslaved person labor. So it really diversity does really affect everything, and it doesn't make us a bad person if we enjoy Harry Potter, but we do have to recognize where that bigotry is literally written into the book, and what can we do to make sure that that bigotry doesn't become our own bigotry. So then on the flip side, we can look at this from a good perspective. What is authentic diversity and what does that look like? And I'm going to do a little humble brag here, but I'm going to talk about CCI specifically and some things that we have here, because I've been working on this for over 2 years with the DEI Council and admin. And the first thing was announced in about mid-October for International Pronouns Day, but on our faculty, staff, student directories, on our CLC websites. It's very hard to see in this picture, but we do list pronouns for all of for our faculty and staff. And that is something that it looks incredibly small, where it looks like it's not like a rainbow logo that everyone's going to publicly see and all, but it's something that is really actually making an impact. It's normalizing pronouns where cis people are listing their pronouns. It is on our website and our directory right next to people's names, where their offices are, things like that. And it's normalizing this type of diversity at CCI. And then additionally, that was just rolled out about 2 weeks ago, is that there's a picture of a sanitary bin in the men's stalls. And these sanitary bins are in every single women's bathroom stall, and they're for menstrual products. They do not exist in men's bathrooms 99.9% of the time, because cisgender men don't get menstrual cycles. That being said, transgender men do. People who aren't men who use the men's bathroom may get menstrual cycles. And it's things where this is another thing where once it wasn't broadcasted to the entire world that this is something that is happening, it is more a small thing, that it is a small piece of, it's a small resource. There's the word. It's a small resource for the people who really need it. And not everyone is going to need it, but the people who do need it are going to benefit from it. So that is an example at CCI. And I guess the next question is like, why does this matter? If it's only affecting, in air quotes, a small subset of the population. And let's look at this from a completely selfish perspective, where the only things that matter are the things that directly affect us. So I can go back to the Harry Potter reference, but I'm actually going to go on, look at the entire field of computer science and how the entire field of computer science was affected by diversity. So here I have Alan Turing, who is very famous in very important in computer science. Just to list a few of his contributions, involve the Turing test regarding AI and whether a human can be fooled by a computer answering questions. Then in the realm of computability and more computing theory and how computers work, he has the Turing machines and the Einstein's problem. I'm not pronouncing that right, I'm sure. Which is once again asking what can computers compute and what can computers not compute. And then more relevant here is breaking the Enigma code, which we see in the movie The Imitation Game. And the reason why I'm focusing on that is because in his later life at age 39, he was arrested for homosexuality. So being gay was illegal in 1952. And he was given a choice between jail time or chemical castration. and he chose to undergo chemical castration, and he died 16 days before his 42nd birthday, which many people believe to be is a suicide by cyanide apple, and very closely related to his favorite fairy tale, Snow White, and setting up himself in bed with the cyanide laced apple. Um, and so how does the Enigma code actually connect to his treatment is that in World War II, during the Holocaust, there were millions of Jewish people put in concentration camps alongside Romani people and gay men. And gay men were marked with a pink triangle. And some of the horrible things that Nazis did in concentration camps to gay men was a variety of genetic testing or in experiments, one of which is the exact chemical castration that Alan Turing went through. So breaking the Enigma code was something that he did during World War II to directly benefit England during the war, only to be later in his life he was treated through the same Nazi treatment that he would have faced if he hadn't broken the Enigma code. And that is just heartbreaking to see. But he died a few days before his 42nd birthday, and he has made incredible contributions to the field of computer science in only 40 years. It is incredible. It is not, I don't know if incredible is the right word. It's sad to think how many more contributions he would have made if he had lived a full life to something like 80 and had been able to double his lifespan. So that, as computer scientists, homophobia directly affects our field and the research we do, even if it was 50, 60 years ago. So how do we build the authentic diversity? How can we work with this? And obviously, we can't bring Alan Turing back or anything like that, but what can we actually do? And it's really, but mostly listening and learning. And I put here, we're at Drexel University, either attending Philly Codefest or as employees or students. But the whole point of universities is to learn. That's why we're here. So how do you learn and where do you start? It's starting with yourself. So the first two links that I have here are nativeland.ca and slavevoyages.org. And you can go to these websites and put in your location. And Native Land will show you what Native American tribe used to inhabit the land that we are on. So in Philadelphia, it currently sits on the land of the Lenni Lenape tribe, and they tended to the land for thousands of years before Americans came and colonized them and stole their land. And Philadelphia would not be able to exist if the Native American people did not take care of the land for thousands upon thousands of years. And then after we had taken the land from the Native Americans, the people who tended to the land were enslaved people. So Slave Voyages is paying homage to the enslaved people and the trade, the trade routes that they went through, and what country specifically people came from to get to certain places, and really showing the work that went into getting Philadelphia to where it was before slavery was abolished. So that is just learning and that's not just Philadelphia, that's anywhere. But that's where learning the history of where we are at right now. And just by learning that history, it really informs a lot of the things that are happening around the world today or are happening in America, the hot topics you'll see in the news, where it makes sense how we got to this place based on how we started. And then from there, once you learn about like the area where you're inhabited, you can learn about how discrimination has impacted your hobbies and fields and interests, and think like, oh, diversity doesn't affect me because I don't know, I'm making something up, like, I don't know, knitting, and there's no whatever marginalized group that knits or something. It's not that people aren't there if you can't see them. It means that people are trying to be there and there is some barrier that's getting in the way. and I am a transgender man, and there are not many transgender men at CCI or in the STEM field. And it's not CCI's fault that there aren't many trans men in the STEM field. But what are the it's not that trans men don't do STEM. It's there's systemic barriers that are stopping trans people from being able to take up the space that they are meant to. And so, how has discrimination impacted your field, your hobbies, your interests? And I just talked about that already with like Harry Potter and Alan Turing. And then just this one's more fun, but learning a language that you care about and you're interested in. And this is mostly directed at the people who took 3 years of French in high school and can only say bonjour now. And the reason I'm saying that is because I found this post online and I find it absurdly hilarious. It says the spork is a devil's utensil because it is the amalgamation of the masculine fork and the feminine spoon and is trying to blur gender lines in society. So if that statement wasn't already absurd enough, in Italian, the fork is la forchetta and the spoon is il cucchiaio, meaning that in Italian, forks are feminine and spoons are masculine. So just learning another language, especially once again, if you took 3 years of Spanish in high school and you can say hola and that's it. Learning another language really shows how gender is very ambiguous across cultures and it normalizes trans people existing. And one of the things too with the native land is that Native Americans had more than two genders and those were erased when their land was taken from them. So learning a language that you actually care about really can open up your worldview a lot in ways that you aren't really intending. And then what can you do from that once you actually learn what can you do? Because personally, I cannot fix global struggles. For example, in Texas, it is become child abuse to allow children to transition. So that means that if a teacher or a doctor suspects a parent of allowing their child to go through transitions, they are allowed to call or they are required to call child protective services to have those parents tried for child abuse. And I personally cannot fix what's going on in Texas, but I can use that to inform my approaches that I take here at Drexel and the things that I do here and the way that I inform myself and the way I educate myself and others around me. It's like how although putting menstrual trash cans in the men's room doesn't solve the issues in Texas or the issues globally for that matter, it does educate the people who attend Drexel and use the bathroom about trans issues a bit more and showing that they're not these taboo, horrible things and that and that trans people being able to exist doesn't affect other people as much as the news would claim it to be. So then as an individual, educating yourself first and foremost, it allows you to support people who are struggling and understand why these things affect them and why they are hurt. You can educate other people on uninformed and dangerous beliefs. I'm a big person on education and like you'll see this a lot in like pop cultures, like this whole cancel culture. And I'm not a big fan of cancel culture. I think it's much more important to be always learning and always growing. And once again, we're at a university. That's what we are doing. So making sure to take the time to, if possible, take the time to try and inform your friends. These beliefs are uninformed and potentially dangerous. And if the situation does get dangerous, being able to recognize that. And then also voting and protesting and just being able to build community as an individual. While it's not able to fix global struggles, it is something that can build community and make your sphere of influence a safer place. And then more as organizational leaders. So this is kind of geared towards either like this can be like your company who is sponsoring Philly Codefest, or you're a officer for a student org. So really looking at your population, do I have a diverse population? Why or why not? Because if you don't, it's not because diverse people aren't applying because they shouldn't be in your field. What is the barrier that is stopping them from applying? Why don't diverse people want to work at your company? what resources can you create to make the people who work at your company happier and safer? And the same goes for student orgs. What can you do within your student orgs to actually educate people about discrimination that has happened in whatever your student org is about? Because I'm sure I could go to every single student org that Drexel has and say, hey, this is the history of whatever you're doing, and this is where discrimination occurred, and this is what you can do to, at the very least, educate about it and make decisions to prevent things like that in the future in your org. So I think that is all I have. So thank you for attending or watching the recording, and thank you, Dave and the Philly Codefest organizers, for having me. I guess I have time for questions or comments or anything.
So as a student at Drexel, what are some avenues to, if I see any behavior that is not the most diverse, that is promoting bad practices or is offensive or you're microaggressive or whatever the case may be, what are the proper channels to go through in that case?
So it really is. So I'm going to say, for the sake of officialness, it is reporting to the Office of Equality and Diversity and saying this is what happened and making a formal report that way. That is the recommended Drexel way of going about things. However, that isn't always the most effective route. Like, if you just overhear someone talking, like another student talking in a classroom setting or group setting, like I know CCI has a non-binary professor, and they use only they them pronouns, and if a student misgenders them, another student will just shout across the room and correct them, correct the student. And that's a situation where you don't need to involve something like OED. But if you have things that are more microaggressions, I always try to educate first. If that's not possible, or that's puts you in an unsafe space, reporting to OED because they have like their formal ways of handling the situation. But I also like to either take it a step further and contact whoever is in charge in the situation. So if I am in a situation where another student in my class is making me uncomfortable and I have to work with them, not only will I report to like OED, or I'll report to the professor first and say, is there anything that I can do to avoid this student in the future, or avoid a situation like this? And the professor then can report for OED on your behalf, which allows for more anonymity for the student, and also probably more beneficial direct action that can protect the student, because OED wouldn't have the jurisdiction to change assignments for a course and things like that. And then if an issue happens with a professor, bring it up to the department heads and bring it up to not only like OAD for more formal purposes, but also bring it up to the people who have the ability to change the situation for your benefit a bit more and put you in a more safer space, if that makes sense.
Great.
This is wonderful. We can sit here awkwardly for the rest of the 25 minutes. That would be really fun.
I have a question. So like, I'm not exactly sure how to word it, but like going into like companies, like how can I tell whether or not like they're really like, because every company has like, you know, an LGBT organization, but like, how do I, you know, determine whether or not they're like truly inclusive, or they just have an LGBT organization that doesn't really like do anything?
So I'm a little bit more direct than most people are, and I will straight up say, so one of the things I have on my interview is or not on my interview, on my resume, I do have oSTEM listed, and it's actually closer to the top, not because like oSTEM is the most important experience I have on my resume, but I really like to make it clear like I am a queer transgender man, and it's very clear based on the like when I've gone to interviews, like organizations that recognize it and are like, wow, you did this stuff for the LGBTQ community. That's awesome. That's cool. Or, oh, you're active in things versus people that'll just ignore it. But then more direct is I will straight up ask in interviews, I am a transgender man. I'm going to be working at your company from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. I am going to have to use the bathroom at some point during the workday. Is it safe for me to use the restroom here? What type of things do you have in place if that something happens? Things like that, because you are spending so much time at a company. And then same with trans people, like healthcare policies. Like, do they have does most companies, I guess, for full-time positions give you healthcare? Is trans healthcare covered in their insurance policies? And it's a little bit extra work on the trans person, sadly, or any queer person or any marginalized group, really. But it is other little steps that are not big steps to make sure that you are going to be in a safe environment.
Thanks. Yeah, I just turned 26, so health insurance has hit me in the face like a brick, and like interviewing at places, just having to like go through all their health insurance stuff and figure out like if they even cover HRT and stuff is like pretty important.
I know that Medicaid covers trans healthcare. If you have a job, obviously you wouldn't qualify for Medicaid, but until that point, that is like, if you're unemployed, it is a very, very helpful route to take, because they like, I know surgery for me was completely free, which was awesome.
Damn, that is awesome. I already got health insurance that isn't Medicaid, and yeah, I'm not sure if they'll cover like top surgery or anything like that, but I'll find out.
So the one thing that I know, the reason Medicaid covers trans stuff is because they have there. It's not a loophole, but it kind of is, where they say we can't discriminate on the basis of gender. So every single trans healthcare provider, the intention of that line in the health insurance policy was like gynecology services and things like that, and reproductive health and things. But then every trans healthcare provider was like, oh, you mean gender, like all of them, not just women's healthcare. Okay. And we're able to kind of use that to get trans healthcare through.
I have a quick question. Is there a resource at Drexel to report, well, not report, but maybe talk to someone about a discriminatory experience you had during an interview for co-op, like a job that you found through Drexel and the interviewer wasn't the best, like the most polite, and refused to acknowledge your identity?
So I have not experienced that, but I would say that's still OED, and Steinbright would be the people that you would report a situation like that to, because they're the main OED is the main reporting center, but also letting Steinbright know, because Steinbright will investigate companies that are not upholding Drexel policies.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. if anything else, I'll post my slides online at some point when I get a chance. And then Dave, we'll be posting the recording somewhere, I'm sure.
The recording will be up on YouTube probably by the end of this weekend or Monday. Any
Awesome,
other
yeah.
questions or thoughts? If not, Charlie, I want to thank you. Sorry, I was in the background. I was running back and forth. But I mean, what I heard was it was really informative. I know I learned a lot. I learned a lot of all these things. But no, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you just for everything you've done here the last couple of years. I know you work on the DEI Council. I know you're in the whatever we call it, the student lab. I just want to
CLC, yes.
Yeah.
There.
And I just want to thank you for everything. And Charlie, I don't know if he mentioned it. Charlie's a former winner of Codefest, so it's good to bring our winners back. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone for coming today. And yeah, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out to Charlie, to me. We'll be happy to help you, discuss you, point you in the right direction. And I want to thank everybody for coming, and I look forward to seeing everybody at Codefest in a couple weeks.
Yeah, thank you for coming, and thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for hosting this.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Charlie.